So today I want to talk about the falls. Why is Wichita Falls called Wichita Falls? And I want to do a little update on my first video on the falls way back when I started this channel. So we're getting started right now. Stay tuned. You're going to love this story. Hey, welcome back, y'all. I'm Debbie Dobbins. I'm your host for this episode of Your Wichita Falls. And if you watch this channel, you know that I'm a real estate entrepreneur. I do all things real estate, and I love sharing about Wichita Falls because I think it's one of the greatest communities that you could possibly live in. So that's why I would love it if you would subscribe to this channel. Just hit that button, ring that bell, and you'll be notified every time we upload a new video. So today I want to share about our falls. Now, I did a video way back when I first started this channel, and I watched it and I went, oh, okay. So what you'll find if you ever do anything, you're going to get better at it. And so it's a great video, honestly, it is. But the fact is that there's so much about our falls that I love, and I drive by them every single day because they're right off the 44. And I just did a video recently driving down the 44. So you might want to check that video out. Here's the link right above me. But since its completion, this waterfall has been the focal point of interest to those people who visit Wichita Falls. Why? Well, because we're called Wichita Falls. And there was a time when people were asking, why is it called Wichita Falls? Because there's a little story behind our falls. And if you know anything about me, when I do all of my research about the history of Wichita Falls, frankly, I crack up because you cannot make up the stuff that happens here. You just can't. I think there should just be a movie called Wichita Falls because there's so much history and so much fun. I think I'll call Taylor Sheridan because I think he's from Texas and he does all of the great shows on Paramount right now. But regardless, the falls are man-made. So let's get that part straight. And the reason that Wichita Falls is called Wichita Falls is because there were falls here, real falls, in the early 1800s and obviously before that. This was a very Native American community before we, the civilized people, came here, whatever you want to call that. And we discovered oil and we built communities and all of that happy stuff. So I've done some videos on why Wichita Falls is called Wichita Falls, and Wichita, there's a whole park devoted to that. Wichita means waist deep, and so the Native American women would go and say, you know, it's Wichita, meaning it's waist deep, it's okay to come in. If it's any higher than waist deep, then the river wasn't good to cross. Now, we do have a lot of flooding here because of the way that the Red River goes, and so there were these falls that were here. They weren't gigantic falls, not even as high as the ones that we've man-made, but this multi-tiered waterfall that stands along the Wichita River right now off the 44 has a story to it, which I love stories about Wichita Falls. You know, as I said, the city was named because we did actually have these falls at the beginning of our community. There was a huge flood that happened in the early 1800s, and the falls were washed away. I mean, they weren't that gigantic to begin with, so a big flood came through, it washed them away, and then there were no falls. So seriously, they just didn't have falls anymore. And the city remained Wichita Falls. People would come here often. They would say, why do you call it falls? Where are the falls? These falls that you see today were built a little upstream from where the original falls were 100 years ago that were washed away. Back in 1986, so they washed away in the 1800s, it wasn't until 1986 something began to happen. And what was going on in that period of time was there was a lot of growth. We had an Air Force base come here. We had the oil boom, we had the country club. There's a whole lot of history, and if you watch the channel, you can go watch a lot of these videos about the amazing history. And just like the Gidgets story about the first bank robbery, I tell you, you cannot make this stuff up. So I encourage you to look at that Gidgets video because it's really quite funny too. But back in 1986, about a decade after our tornado, we had a big tornado. Somebody's going to get mad at me. I think it's 79, not 73. 79. A big tornado That's why they call it Tornado Alley, even though we haven't had a tornado like that since. But it devastated the community. And our community was looking for something that just could heal them a little bit. We rebuilt, honestly. There's so much history on that as well. I need to do a video on the tornado because it's really quite fascinating. But it devastated the community, and about a decade later, the Wichita Falls Streams and Valleys Civic Club, and they're responsible for a lot of remembering of our community, but they began a campaign to build a falls in Wichita Falls because they were seeing that the common thing that was being said back in the day was, where are the falls? Which I think is so funny because people would come, tourists would come, people would move here. They'd say, where are the falls? Where are the falls? It's Wichita Falls. There's no falls. And you know, what's interesting is I love Roby Christie. Roby Christie, I'll have to do a video one time on my friend Sherry Christie, who owned Guarantee Title. But Roby Christie is the founder of Hotter Than Hell. So there's a video on Hotter Than Hell here that tells you a lot about Roby Christie. But Roby Christie has just been completely immersed in our community. And he remembers that the echo of that question back then, and he was very instrumental in moving this forward, that there was literally this campaign to bring back some falls, to create some falls. And what happened was there was this upsurge. And so remember, the town was devastated. They were looking for something to bring them together besides just the pain and the heartache and the rebuilding. They wanted to find some joy. Field and Streams decided to have this campaign to bring back some falls, to create some falls, to build some falls. And they enlisted the community, and the TVs stations and the radio stations got together, and they created this cool, and actually a local musician created a song, and it was called Put the Falls Back in Wichita Falls. There's a lot of songs, popular songs out there that have reference to Wichita Falls. There's a lot of people that think that Wichita Falls is a nothing burger, and the fact of the matter is this is a little jewel. There's a little diamond underneath here that's just radiating good to people. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you see a YouTube video on Put the Falls Back in Wichita Falls. So here we're going to play this, and I want you to just watch this really quickly because you can see so much of the town that still looks the same, which I think is fantastic. You can see the overpass. It goes past the downtown. The downtown, I did a video on that recently. And the skyline, Big Blue is there. It wasn't exactly a music video, I can tell you back then. But it was a compilation by KFDX, KAUZ, and KFDX to promote the idea. So as you watch this video and listen to it, you can see how many things actually look the same. The backdrop of the downtown, as I said, and the friendliness of the community, because the song talks about that. This is something that we are so fundamentally enmeshed in that I just love our community. So take a listen here for a second.
We'd like you to see and hear what many people across the country are enjoying about our city. The song and the video of Put the Falls Back in Wichita.
Hours a day, 7 days a week. In stereo, the king of the country with the...
Hey, Dad, where's the falls at?
I don't know. I guess we're going to have to look around a little bit.
Well, people come from miles around to visit our town, just to have a good old time and take a look around. They're asking for directions, they want to see it all. They say, I've seen the Wichita now. Where's the falls? Where's the falls? In Wichita Falls. That's what folks are asking you and me. Let's put the falls back in Wichita Falls, so the folks can see what they came here to see. of the flood of 100 years ago when the falls fell. Let's all pull together and make history and put the falls back in Wichita where it ought to be. Said, come on, everybody, it takes so much land. Let's all pull together and lend a helping hand. We're gonna put the falls right back in Wichita Falls so the folks can see what they came here to see. Put back the falls back in Wichita Falls. Let's make our name become a reality. Let's put the falls back into Wichita Falls
so the folks can see what they came here to see.
Put back the falls back in Wichita Falls.
Let's make our name become a reality. Let's put the falls back in Wichita Falls so the folks can see what they came here to see. I put back the falls, I put them back in Wichita Falls. Let's make our name become a reality. Let's put the
Again, we want to mention that all of the media have been instrumental in helping along that project and producing that video. And we want to say that a local artist named Cinnamon wrote the song.
And you know, it's quite a catchy little tune. You know, you're not going to be able to get that out of your head now. Bring the falls back to Wichita Falls. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And you find it getting stuck in your head before this video is over. And guess what? So did the community. Most of the money that they raised as a result of this campaign to build the falls was from private donations, because there was so much backlash that the old guard said, we don't want to spend any city money on that, which I wish they would have done that on a few other projects, but I digress. The private donations they collected, they were able to enlist an architect who could create these plans for these falls. And so they were about to be unveiled, and the city and the community organizations worked together to raise this money to complete this. Basically, today it would be well over $1 million, but it was right at $900,000. It was $1 million project. Let's just call it that. But this project was on its way. So Wichita Falls built this artificial waterfall to put the falls back in Wichita Falls. It was just so, I swear, you cannot make this up. And so you give the city, and what they were doing was they were feeling like they were giving the city what the then mayor, Charles Harper, called a symbol of hope. Because remember, this is after the tornado, and the city needed something for hope. And the funny thing is that so many people today don't know the history of the falls, even if they've lived here forever, and they poo-poo it. And the thing is, it's a man-made fall. It comes from the water, from the river, and some days it's off, some days it's on, some days it's clear, some days it's the red river color, some people call it a mud color, and sometimes it's frozen. This symbol of hope was there for our community, and it was built outside of the Sheridan, I think is what the hotel was there. Unfortunately, this particular area that they built it was prone to flooding. And so if you drive through there now, you'll see that that hotel is abandoned, which I think is very unfortunate, because unfortunately it's subject to flooding and it needs to be shored up. But I digress again. The new falls were inaugurated on June 5th, 1987. Ta-da! There's this big lead up to this. So a couple of things about the falls. There is a rock, or a brick if you will, from Niagara Falls in our falls. I mean, it was a big deal back then. There was a whole lot of things that went into the building of these falls, and people were so excited about it. And we used to have a event, actually this was the second year of it, called Falls Fest. I wish they'd bring that back, but it was like a festival here. It really is Falls Fest, but it was a 3-day event. And so in June of 1987, Falls Fest #2 which the organizers called the biggest turn on in North Texas, which back then it was a big deal. The entertainment included the country rock singer Joe Ely, which I don't even know who that is anymore, and the United States Army's Golden Knights parachute team. So we had the base, and there was just so much fanfare about it. As a matter of fact, Willard Scott, so for those of you that are young and don't know who I'm talking about, Willard Scott used to be on NBC's Today Show, and he would always celebrate people with 100 that had turned 100 or more. So he was on track to come here. He came here, but he showed he would do the weather on the Today Show. So for those of you that don't know Willard Scott, look it up. But there's a gentleman, there's a link in the body of this, and it'll be on the screen here, to a New York Times article on Wichita Falls back in 1987, which I'm telling you, Wichita Falls has got more notoriety than one little tiny town should. I'm telling you, it is a magical place. I'm going to read you a little bit of the article because I think the article in and of itself is just fun to read. But he's talking about how his mother drove him into town from the north on the Central Freeway, Central Expressway, which is where the falls are. And from Wichita Falls, it shows its best aspect. He was sharing what his experience was from the 4 or 5 large downtown buildings. They form an impressive group on the hill above downtown, because if you look at the video that I did of downtown, you can see what I'm talking about, our skyline, if you will. And from there, you can see the Memorial Auditorium, as large as many Broadway theaters. That's what he said back in the day. Now we have the Impact. And the Acropolis-like First Baptist Church, which covers a whole city block, which I think it takes up a quarter of downtown now. But he was talking about that coming down the bluff, if you come down 5th Street, from Riverside Cemetery, which is another great video because there's so much activity going on in Riverside Cemetery, and it's where the guys are buried from the Gidget video. But he said, the unpredictability of the Wichita River, most of the year it's dry, but in the spring it often floods. Here's the thing, that little area where the falls is has a tendency to flood. That's the original falls were flooded away. And it makes it impossible to build the falls in the riverbed itself. So the water is pumped up from the river, sent streaming over this 80-foot cascade. That's why a lot of times you'll see it turned off, because it's man-made and it has to go through this, upward trajectory to get over. And if the pipes are frozen, then that becomes problematic, so they'll turn it off. But there was no attempt at deception. This new location was chosen for maximum visibility from the interstate, he said, which is true. Back then, they wanted you to see it as you came into town, because as you come around that corner, you're actually in town. And I showed you on that recent road trip video. And its proximity to the Sheraton, as I said, that hotel was supposed to be, you could see the falls from the Sheraton Hotel and everything would be spectacular and it would be a big draw for that particular hotel. So these falls were designed by Groves and Associates, and they were a San Antonio engineering and landscape architecture firm, but it had previously designed water beautification projects for San Antonio and Waco. They came highly recommended. They even did a project in Lima, Peru, but the finished product is very impressive, I have to say. I love the falls. I love looking at them. I love them in every state, whether they're clear or muddy or turned off or frozen. The thing is that what the object was is they wanted noise or volume. So the architect set out with that idea in mind. So what happened is, here we are, we're at the unveiling of the 2nd annual Falls Fest, right, of the falls. Because the Falls Fest, this is the 2nd Falls Fest. The first Falls Fest, actually, even though it's a festival and it ended up being an annual event, the first was the kickoff of the fundraising campaign. It's all so interrelated, but they raised enough money. Everyone who had opposed the project came around overnight to just see if things were going okay. They were surprised that this was an unqualified success because people wanted something that they could all get together on. So he wrote that several people told him that it was the best thing that ever happened to this town. So if you think about it from that perspective and go back to what was it about that event, what was it about the camaraderie of the community to replicate that in different ways. And we've had other things come up since then. Roby Christie started Hotter Than Hell. We have the Mud Run. I'm going to forget what it's called right now. But there's things that bring the community together. And anything that can do that to me, in my mind, is a great thing. But the events of the second annual Falls Fest have passed into legend because of the announcement and the unveiling of the Wichita Falls. But the Wichita River was, get this, on the day of the unveiling, the Wichita River was in flood. I mean, who could write that? And so the Sheridan was surrounded by water. So if there were visitors, okay, so we had dignitaries come. Not only was Willard Scott here, but the mayor of Niagara Falls had come. And they were staying in the Sheridan, which is now flooded around with water. I wish they had pictures of this. They had to be taken to the ceremonies because the unveiling of you could see the falls from the Sheridan from the windows on that side. But they had to be taken to the ceremonies in the Wichita Falls Navy. Now, not many of you know that we have a Navy, which it was just a fleet of canoes. And so this reporter for the New York Times, he's watching this, he says, from a hospital in New York City, where his son was being born, because they had it on the Today Show, because Willard Scott was here. So for those of you, if anybody can find that footage of the Today Show coverage of the falls, I would love to see it. So anyways, Willard Scott is here. He was wearing a red cap, his arm around the mayor. So get this, Willard Scott, he had a reputation for being all sweet and kind on camera, and then he'd be a little snarky off. He's got his arm around the mayor and he's saying, I want you to meet America's #1 fall guy, Charles Harper, who's the mayor. Because at the end of the day, all of the work, all of the planning was just sort of dampened by this flood. But the fact is it's something amazing to remember, to think of as you pass by. You know, it's pretty unusual to have a prairie community, which is what we are, and people would just only see mesquite when they would come here in the beginning. But it makes it so incredibly precious that we have these falls, that the community came together to create it, to make it, to raise the money, to allow something like this to be so magical and to make it attractive and appealing. And yes, every once in a while, it doesn't look the most appealing. I love it. I don't care what it looks like. It's like having a child, or myself. If I wake up in the morning without makeup, I still am the most beautiful person that I see in the mirror because I have to love myself. So when you love something, you see it in all its glory, no matter what condition it's in. But once these funds were raised with this amazing effort, this project just enhanced the aesthetics of Wichita Falls. And guess what? No one ever got to say, why are there no falls anymore in Wichita Falls? Because we do have the falls. And it's connected to Lucy Park, so you can take a short hike from Lucy Park over to the falls. You can drive off the freeway, be right there. You can take pictures. You can send postcards. You know, it's an amazing opportunity for our community to have a pride moment. And that's the thing that I see when I drive every single day by those falls. It was the healing after that tornado. It was the people coming together. It was the camaraderie. It was the involvement of everyone that came together to believe in this community, because that's my mission, is to allow people to see Wichita Falls through my eyes of love and goodness, and surround themselves with the amazing people that are here that make up this community. So when you have a chance, if you're in our community, drive by the falls, take a moment, take your guests to show them off through this community walk, enjoy the panoramic view and replay put the falls back in Wichita Falls, because I'm telling you, that tune will stay in your head and you will think about that every single time you drive by the falls. There's 2 more videos coming up. As always, if you want to know any more about anything with this amazing community, you can schedule a Zoom meeting with me in the first comment link below. And I love to share all about Wichita Falls. And as I always say, y'all come back now. You hear?